Hi guys, welcome back to another video, and I'm finally getting around to showing you my pedal board because for the time being I'm happy with it. It's finished, I've sort of learnt my way around it, and yeah, finally getting around to showing it you. So what we'll do first, we'll go into the pedal board, go over the whole entire thing, what it is, you know, where I got it. Every single pedal on there except for the DL4 was used, and over the last sort of 5 months I've been piecing it together, and I'm pretty happy with it so far. So let's take a look at the board, go through it. I'll tell you some sort of pros and cons of each thing on the board, and then we'll get into all the sound demos. I think we'll start with single coils because it's very much so angled towards, you know, that John Frusciante sort of section, but then I've dialed it in so that when I switch to a humbucker guitar, without doing anything, without changing settings, without changing patches, I've got what I think is a really nice sort of Les Paul blues, classic rock and roll sort of tone. So let's get down to the board and we'll chat about that. Right then, so here is the board. So everything on this bottom row here is going into the front of the amplifier, and these two up here are running in the effects loop. I am toying with the idea of running the delay into the front as well, but as it stands and all the, you know, what you hear today, it will be in the effects loop. So I'll go over everything sort of piece by piece then, and as I said, everything on here except for, I think it was except for the power supply and the line 6 was used. These two are the only things that were new, so, you know, I managed to sort of piece this together over time, finding bits and bobs. The DS2 was a nightmare to find, and I actually broke one of them as well, so, you know, figure that, a Boss pedal that breaks. But like I said, we'll go over some sort of pros and cons of each. So signal chain, I come into the tuner first of all. These tuners are like 30 quid new, and I found it to be, like, you know, really accurate, to be fair, no issues. Only downside is when you first turn it on, if it's been off for sort of 10 minutes, there's about a sort of 5-second load in. So if you, maybe live, if you're punching in to tune real quick, that'd get on your nerves, but for like 30 quid, it's pretty damn good. Out of the tuner, we come into the Boss DS2, and this is where, you know, we're very much so into that. I'll turn it on to mute the amp. We're very much so into, you know, the John section of the board, which was always going to happen for me, you know, being a massive sort of Frusciante fan. So Boss DS2, sorry, signature John sound. We'll go over that. I'm sure you all know how that sounds. After the DS2, we're going into the Ibanez WH10 Wah V3. I did have a Vox Silvertop on here before, and I still think I potentially prefer the Vox Silvertop, but with the Ibanez you do get that little bit more sort of sweep, and they are much easier to turn on and off, which is handy if you want to do that sort of Hendrix wah on and off thing. So that's how I've got that. I've got it set to sort of 3/4 of the way up on the volume just here. That seems to work, and in true bypass mode as well. I don't think it makes too much difference on the sound. Out of the WH10, this is the centerpiece of the board. This is what's, you know, turning my katana into more of a valvy Marshall kind of feel, and it's also controlling the diva-ish volume behaviour of the DS2 and Ibanez Wah. This is keeping those in check, and it's essentially just a plexi style pedal. You know, I have done a video on this, but since then I have dialed it in a lot more. It also has a fuzz built into it as well, which is a real nice sounding Hendrix sort of modded fuzz, which again we'll show you on the sound demos. The downside to this pedal though, that I've learned, now I've used it for the last couple of weeks, is it's dying to be a fuzz pedal basically, and if you want to dial in that sort of cranked Marshall natural overdrive sound, it just goes straight into fuzz rather than overdrive. So I run this pedal with the gain basically off and the master volume maxed out, and that tends to give me, it just changes the response more than the tone itself. Again, I'll show you all this in context when we do the sound examples. And then coming out of that, we're going into another Marshall style pedal. So this is the Friedman small box, and in fairness you could probably dial this back and get a very, you know, broken clean sort of Marshall sound just from this pedal as well. But I'm using this to, anytime I want to, especially with humbuckers, go on to that classic rock, you know, really nice sort of saturated kind of tone but not into metal territory. I'm using this pedal and it is, you know, so far so good on that front. Like downsides to this pedal, to be fair, I haven't really come across any. I've been pretty happy with it. I mean, it's perhaps a little bit expensive when they're new, but obviously, like I said, you know, I didn't pay anywhere near that for it, so I'm pretty happy with it really. Going out of this, I am going into the chorus, and that's sort of bookending the John Frusciante sort of sides of the board, if you like. I did shoot out quite a few choruses. I tried a TC Corona, you know, a bunch of other sort of smaller factor chorus pedals, but I just found this one to be the most accurate sort of Frusciante sound. The only downside to this one is, like a lot of chorus pedals, it does take off a little bit of overall volume when you engage it, and I found that with loads of chorus pedals. This one just did it the least. I'm not sure why all choruses don't have a sort of preamp in there to buff that back up. You know, very much like the Boss CE1 that John uses has that preamp, and it sort of gives you all your volume back. But this one though, still pretty happy with it, you know, no real issues. And of course, outside of the Frusciante stuff, it's just a good chorus pedal. And that's it that's going into the front. It is just those sort of 5 plus the tuner. And then we're going into the effects loop. So coming out of the effects loop, I'm hitting my delay modeler. This is the only pedal on the board that was new. Like I said, it's the Mark II DL4. This I've been getting my head around this for the last sort of couple of weeks, because there's a whole host of different delays and reverbs all built into it, and there is no sort of sub menu scrolling. It's all very, very tactile, and then you've got your sort of presets. It also does function as a looper, and I have to say it does kind of make that redundant, because the looper in here is very, very good. I've left this looper on because the only downside to it is if you use the looper, I think you lose use of like the other effects. It's yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't figured out how to kind of use all of its functions at once. So it's just easier to, you know, give the looper job to a looper pedal, which I'll get to in a minute. Downsides to this pedal is it's the graphics, honestly, because when you're stood up playing, you cannot read any of this. You kind of have to learn the pedal. You have to know where everything is. And each one of these settings here, there's also a hidden reverb setting, which you access by holding down the Alt button, then turning it, and still whilst you're holding it down, you then tweak the reverb settings. And all of that has to be learnt sort of, you know, by heart to know where you are within the pedal. So that is a downside, but once you've learned that and you've assigned your presets, it's a wicked pedal. It's slightly smaller than the original Mark I version, which funny enough John does use, although this is basically just a delay and reverb function. It's more of a coincidence that John used the Mark I. But any kind of delay, any kind of reverb, any kind of modulation, like, you know, the weird sort of like particle verbs and modulated reverse echoes and stuff like that, you can do in here. And yeah, I just think it's a great addition to a board if you want a reverb and delay. And like I said, we'll get to the sounds of that in just a minute. And then it finishes off with the looper pedal. Now with looper pedals, it's very easy to sort of just think any looper pedal is the same, but they're not. I've tried quite a few, and particularly the lower end Boss ones, and you do get like a distinct difference in quality of the loops. And I found this one with the, you know, 2 controls to be absolutely the best one within a reasonable price. You can pick these up used for about 70 quid, and you know, maybe a bit less even, and they're, you know, they're easy to use with the 2-foot switches. The quality is fantastic. You can store loops, and you do have a couple of basic effects on it as well. And when you use this straight into the front, which highlights a weakness in a lot of loopers. If your looper isn't really good quality on the playback and you're running into the front, you will know about it. But when you run this one into the front, it's pretty much as good as running it via the effects loop. I have got this in the effects loop, but that's just because that's a more preferable way. But if you don't have an effects loop and you want a good clean looper, the 720 by EHX Electro Harmonics is the best one that I've personally come across. So, you know, the only other thing I suppose is the board itself. I bought this board used. It is the new Fender medium sized board that matches their power supply. And look at the space. This is the medium sized board, and there is plenty of room on it. It's a pretty nice solid board. The reason why the guy sold it though is because when you attach the power supply that you can see just there, and you tighten up the power supply, the board very quickly starts sort of bending, it sort of starts convexing, and that was doing his head in, so he decided to sell it. So, and you know, that does happen. I noticed when I tighten this one up, it does start bending, and you have to kind of balance it, and you can't get that quite as tight as you should be able to without the board bending, so that's a downside. But you know, the board itself, I think it's sturdy, plenty of room on it, it looks good, and it comes with a wicked bag as well, which, you know, real nice quality bag to put it all away once you're finished. So I do recommend it, just bear in mind it does bend a bit once you start winding in the power supply. And the power supply is the other thing I got new. That is the engine room level 8, so I can power 8 different pedals. It's got USB ports on it as well if I want to charge, like, you know, some USB-C or USB-A stuff. And it's a good power supply. I've had no issues with it. It's nice and quiet, reliable. I do think it's too big for what it is. It could definitely be downsized. But when you pair it with this board, which is designed for it, you know, you're going to have no issues. It's happy days all around there. So that's an overall view of the pedals, what they are, and all that means nothing without hearing them in context. So let's get back up top and go through them, you know, with sounds. So getting on to the sounds then, I'm going to start off with my Strat for single coils. This is a sound with every single pedal off, how I've got the katana set. So that's just on the clean mode of the katana with the gain up, and it's just giving me a clean, flat pedal platform essentially. I have tried using the power amp in direct on the katana because that is what this setup was kind of for on the katana, and I find it just doesn't work. Just going into the clean channel on there, or even the crunch channel with, if you want a bit more hair as your bass line, works way better. So like I said, this is just straight in. And it sounds okay as a flat guitar sound, but when I put on the loud and proud, this is what I get. And it hasn't changed the tone a great deal. There's a bit more EQ in there, but what it's doing from my point of view, as you know, playing through it, it's just giving it that little bit more valve-like response to me. And I do play valve amps a lot outside of here, so I kind of know what I'm trying to look for. And I find that this pedal, set with the volume all the way up, gain all the way down, does just give me that more valve-esque response from the katana, and that's what it's doing. That's its only job, as well as controlling the other pedals when we turn them on, because it's adding a bit of compression, which the DS2 and WH10 very much so need. But off. So you can tell tonally they are similar, but it's the feel that is the main thing for me. It is adding that bit of volume obviously, but it just feels better with it on. And like I said, it's also controlling the DS2, so when we turn that on, controlling the volume, because with it off, you got this, let's turn the wire off a minute. It's more of a volume jump. I'm not sure if YouTube compression will sort that out, but in the room, without a pedal to control the DS2, you do get that spike, but with it on, it's very much so more controlled, and you know, that's a bonus. You need to have that. You can instead you can have the amp just cranked, and then when you turn it on you won't get it, but I'm at home and I can't just crank an amp, unfortunately. So coming out of that is the Friedman, and with, again, I said before, this works better with the humbuckers, but if I, again, bass sound with the loud and proud, add the Friedman. It still sounds like a Marshall to me, and it's just giving you that way more rock kind of sound, and I really like it for that. Yeah, like I said, I got no issues with that pedal, and with humbuckers, that's where it really shines. If you're interested in how that's set, there's a bit of gain, and I'm kind of using it the same as the Loud and Proud. I'm adding a bit of gain, but using the volume of the pedal to simulate that more driven, more pushed cooking valve amplifier, and I'm pretty happy with how that sounds. Coming out of that, there we got the chorus, so I'll show you that now. It's just doing the chorus thing. It does the chorus. All that typical stuff we need chorus for. It's a good chorus pedal. Like I said, it does lose a little bit of volume, but of all the chorus pedals that I was able to try, that one did it the least without having a dedicated master volume. And chorus pedals that do have a dedicated master volume, they're insanely expensive for some reason. So let's go on to the DL4. And like I said, there's a lot of features in this one. I'll probably do a video of this pedal on its own at some point, but now would be a good chance in the video to say pedal videos are very new to me. They're hard for me to make for some reason. I prefer to just have them in the videos and you just know that that's the sound you're hearing. Doing dedicated videos on them just is weird for me for some reason. But I'll show you how it sounds anyway, and then maybe we'll come back and do a dedicated video on it. This is my general sort of delay that I've got for preset A. Very sort of don't forget me on that one. And again, there's so many on there, I'm just sort of dialing them in as I go really, but you can't have a delay without edge, can you? It's a, you know, especially in the effects loop, it's a very nice clean delay. It gives you all the tweakability you're ever going to need for a delay, and when you're running in front it does dirty up a little bit, but I kind of like that, and I might actually end up running it in front for that reason. But I've got a reverb sort of preset on here as well, which I might as well show you. It's just a very washy reverb, but without any kind of modulation. And there are so many reverbs in this pedal. This is just one that I like for sort of looping, so let's do a little loop, I suppose. that. It's a loop pedal, it's nice and clean in the effects loop. Dedicated volume control, presets, half speed, all that kind of stuff. So there you go, you get the idea. It's a looper, it does loop things, plenty of features, and more affordable than a lot of other loopers with the same features. So now I think I'm going to swap to a humbucker guitar without changing a single thing, and you'll see that I'm getting what I want from the board without having to sort of muck about other than changing the guitar. So just plug straight in. So obviously with humbuckers I've got a little bit more output from the pickups, and this is the sound we're getting from the amp. A little bit more breakup just naturally from the higher output. Obviously these are still low output humbuckers, but when I turn the loud and proud on, responsive, breaks up a little bit when I dig in. Again, just adding to that valve emulation kind of feel for me here without a valve amp. And I think it does that very well on exactly the same settings. I haven't had to change that at all. And if I want to do sort of the, you know, low breakup Pete Greeny type stuff, it does a pretty good job of that. I could probably have a bit more volume on the amp there as well, but when I combine that with the Friedman with humbuckers, it is just out and out rock and roll, but not going into that kind of metal territory, and I just think it sounds brilliant, to be fair. And it just gives me the sound I want, and like I say, if I put the fuzz on top of that, it just goes absolutely insane, as you can probably hear by the volume there. If I go into I've just got so many different sort of levels of tone at my disposal with the guitar and pretty much those two pedals, without having to mess around with changing the amp settings, without having to mess around with changing the pedal settings. It's just swapping the guitar, and that's kind of what I wanted from this board. But then if I want just, you know, a hybrid of that low clean breakup and heavier rock when I combine the Friedman, if I just use the Friedman on its own, I just get more of a naturally wound up Marshall without too much. And like I said, I just like having that flexibility across this board. I've got the John stuff in with the single coils, but just by changing guitar, I can go for a, you know, completely different kind of feel and vibe. So all the kind of tones I like to be able to get with a humbucker guitar, with a single coil guitar, I feel I'm able to get somewhere near with this board and with my Boss katana. And don't get me wrong, you know, I'd love to have a proper valve amp in here cooking and all that sort of stuff, and it's something I've been looking at over the last few weeks. How can I find one? How can I get one that I can play at home? But I just can't quite find something that gives me what this setup can do at home volumes through a valve amp at this point in time, without having external sort of equipment. So going forward in videos, you'll just hear these pedals, you know, throughout the videos. I won't necessarily mention them, but this is the board that, generally speaking, you will hear. So if you have any questions or want to see videos about specific pedals, because, you know, you could do a video on each of these, and people do, let me know. But I just wanted to introduce you to my board that I've been building up over the last sort of 5 months or so, and show you where I'm at with it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week for more videos.